In 2019, a taxi driver in Chicago picked up what seemed like a normal passenger at 2 a.m. The man was quiet, well-dressed, and gave an address on the outskirts of town. 15 minutes into the drive, the driver glanced in the rearview mirror, and the back seat was empty. The doors never opened. The locks never clicked. The passenger had simply vanished. Taxi drivers see a side of the city most people never witness. The late-night streets, the desperate passengers, the things that happen when the world is asleep. Tonight, I'm sharing 5 disturbing true stories from taxi drivers who encountered something they'll never forget. These aren't urban legends. These are real experiences from real people who were just trying to finish their shift. You might want to turn on a light for this one. This first story comes from a driver named Marcus, who worked the night shift in New Orleans for over a decade. He told me he'd seen it all: drunks, fights, even a few robberies. But nothing prepared him for what happened one humid August night in 2016. It was around 3:30 a.m. when Marcus got a ping for a pickup on the edge of the French Quarter. The location was unusual, a narrow side street he rarely got calls from. When he pulled up, a woman was standing under a broken streetlight. She wore a long white dress, completely out of place for the neighborhood. Her hair hung down, covering most of her face. Marcus hesitated. Something fell off, but she was already walking toward the cab, so he unlocked the door. She slid into the back seat without a word. Marcus asked where she was headed. Silence. He turned around to look at her, and that's when he noticed she was dripping wet. Her dress, her hair, everything. Puddles were forming on his back seat. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked. "Did something happen?" Her head tilted up slightly, but her hair still covered her face. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Take me home. 1427 Dauphine Street." Marcus knew that address. Everyone in New Orleans did. It was the site of a historic mansion that had burned down in 1973. 23 people died in that fire. The lot had been empty for decades. His hands were shaking as he put the car in drive. He tried to convince himself she was confused, maybe on drugs. But the way she sat perfectly still, the smell of smoke that was now filling the cab, something was very wrong. He drove toward Dauphine Street, checking the mirror every few seconds. She never moved, never blinked, just stared forward with her head slightly tilted. When Marcus was 2 blocks from the address, he worked up the courage to speak. "Ma'am, there's nothing at that address anymore. It burned down a long time ago. Do you have somewhere else I can?" He glanced in the mirror. The back seat was empty. Marcus slammed on the brakes and whipped around. Nothing. No woman. No puddles. The back seat was completely dry. He checked the locks, still engaged. She couldn't have opened the door without him hearing it. But there, on the seat where she'd been sitting, was a single object, a partially burned photograph of a woman in a white dress, standing in front of the mansion on Dauphine Street. On the back, written in faded ink, 1973. Marcus quit driving that same night. He told me he still has the photograph, but he's never looked at it again. This next story takes place in Seattle, and it was sent to me by a driver named Emma. She'd only been driving for Uber for about 6 months when this happened, and she swears it's the reason she now only works during daylight hours. It was a Friday night, around 1 a.m. Emma got a request to pick someone up from a downtown bar. Normal enough. When she arrived, a man in his 40s climbed into the back seat. He was wearing a suit, looked professional, and seemed sober. He gave her an address in a residential neighborhood about 20 minutes away. The first 10 minutes of the drive were silent. Then, out of nowhere, the man spoke. "You should call your sister." Emma froze. "Excuse me?" "Your sister," he repeated calmly. "You should call her. Tonight." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. She had a sister, but they'd been estranged for almost 2 years after a falling out. She hadn't mentioned her to anyone, and certainly not to this stranger. I don't know what you're talking about," she lied. The man leaned forward slightly. Emma could see his eyes in the rearview mirror. They were calm, almost sympathetic. "She's been trying to reach you," he said. "She needs to tell you something important. Something about your father." Emma's hands tightened on the wheel. Her father had passed away 3 years ago. How could this man possibly know any of this? "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "Just someone who notices things," he said. "Call her before Sunday. It's important." Emma wanted to pull over, wanted to tell him to get out, but something kept her driving. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was curiosity. They drove the rest of the way in silence. When she pulled up to the address, a modest house on a quiet street, the man handed her a $20 bill for a $12 fare. "Keep the change," he said. "And Emma, call your sister." He knew her name. She'd never told him her name. Before she could say anything, he got out and walked up to the house. Emma sat there, paralyzed, watching as he reached the front door. But he didn't knock. He didn't go inside. He just stood there. Then he turned around and looked directly at her. Even from that distance, she could see his expression. It wasn't threatening. It was sad. Emma drove away as fast as she could. She tried to convince herself it was just a creepy passenger, maybe someone who'd looked her up online somehow. But that night, she couldn't sleep. The man's words kept echoing in her head. The next morning, against every instinct telling her not to, Emma called her sister. Her sister answered on the second ring, and Emma could immediately hear that she'd been crying. "Emma," her sister said, her voice breaking, "I've been trying to reach you. I found something in Dad's things. A safety deposit box we didn't know about. Inside there was a letter. For you." Emma's blood ran cold. The letter, her sister explained, was dated just 2 days before their father died. In it, he apologized for things Emma never knew about. Secrets he'd kept, mistakes he'd made. Things that explained so much of their family's dysfunction. "I was going to mail it to you," her sister said, "but I wanted to talk to you first. To explain, I've been calling all week." Emma asked when her sister had started trying to reach her. "Thursday night," her sister said, "the night before Emma met the passenger." Emma never saw that man again. She checked the address she dropped him off at. The house belonged to an elderly couple who'd lived there for 30 years. They'd never heard of anyone matching his description. To this day, Emma has no explanation for how that passenger knew what he knew. But she reconciled with her sister, and they've been close ever since. Sometimes, Emma wonders if her father had somehow sent that man. She doesn't like to think about it too much. This story is probably the most disturbing one I'm going to share tonight, and it comes from a driver in Manchester, England, named David. This happened in the winter of 2018. David picked up a young man around midnight from a nightclub. The passenger, David estimates he was maybe 22 or 23, seemed agitated. He kept looking over his shoulder as he got into the cab. "Where to?" David asked. The young man gave an address on the other side of the city, about a 30-minute drive. But then he added something strange. "Take the long way. Use the back roads. Please." David asked if something was wrong. The passenger shook his head, but wouldn't make eye contact. I need to avoid the main roads tonight. I'll pay extra. Please." There was genuine fear in his voice, so David agreed. He took an alternate route, winding through smaller residential streets and industrial areas. About 15 minutes into the drive, the passenger's phone rang. He looked at the screen and his face went white. He rejected the call. It rang again immediately. He rejected it again. Then the text started coming. David could hear the constant buzzing from the back seat. The passenger was staring at his phone, his hands trembling. "Are you sure you're okay?" David asked. "Do you need me to call someone?" "No," the passenger said quickly. "No police. Just keep driving. Please." David was getting concerned, but something told him this kid was in real trouble. He kept driving. Then, about 5 minutes later, they were stopped at a red light on a deserted street when another car pulled up next to them. A black sedan, tinted windows. The passenger saw it and immediately ducked down in the back seat. "Drive," he whispered urgently. "Don't wait for the light. Just drive." David hesitated for only a second before his instincts kicked in. He ran the red light and accelerated down the street. The black sedan followed. David's heart was racing now. He took a hard left, then a right, to try to lose the car. The passenger was still crouched in the back seat, practically hyperventilating. "Who is that?" David demanded. "I can't tell you," the passenger said. "Just please lose them." David had been driving a cab for 15 years. He knew these streets like the back of his hand. He took a series of quick turns through a housing estate, cutting through a narrow alley, and finally emerged onto a main road. The sedan was gone. David drove for another 10 minutes in silence, constantly checking his mirrors. The passenger slowly sat back up, still shaking. When they finally reached the address, the passenger handed David 60 pounds for a 20-pound fare. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You might have saved my life tonight." Before David could ask what was going on, the passenger got out and ran toward an apartment building. David watched him frantically punch in a door code and disappear inside. David sat there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. Then he drove home, still on edge. 2 days later, David saw a news report that made his blood run cold. A young man, matching his passenger's description, had been found dead in his apartment. The police were treating it as a homicide. The victim had been stabbed multiple times. The estimated time of death was around 2 a.m., just 2 hours after David had dropped him off. David contacted the police immediately and told them everything. He described the black sedan, the route he'd taken, the way the passenger had been terrified. The case is still unsolved. David thinks about that night constantly. He wonders if he'd just driven him straight home instead of taking the long way. Would the passenger still be alive? Or were those extra minutes the only reason he made it home at all? The police told David that based on the estimated time of death, whoever killed the young man must have been waiting for him at his apartment. They've been tracking him all along. David doesn't drive nights anymore. And whenever he thinks about that passenger, about how scared he was, about how he knew someone was after him, he can't help but wonder who was in that black sedan and how did they know where he lived. This story comes from Toronto and was shared by a driver named Lisa. It's less violent than the last one, but in some ways, it's even more unsettling. Lisa had been driving for about 3 years when she started noticing a pattern. Every Thursday night, around 11 p.m., she would get a request from the same address, an older apartment building in a quiet neighborhood. And every time, it was the same passenger, an elderly woman, probably in her 70s, always wearing the same dark coat and carrying a small purse. The woman would always request the same destination, a hospital about 15 minutes away. At first, Lisa thought nothing of it. Lots of people visit hospitals at odd hours, sick relatives, night shift workers, emergencies. But after the 5th or 6th time, Lisa started to notice things that didn't add up. The woman never spoke. Not once. She would just get in, Lisa would confirm a destination, and they would drive in complete silence. When they arrived at the hospital, the woman would hand Lisa exact change and get out. But here's the strange part. Lisa started watching where the woman went. She would walk toward the hospital entrance, but she never actually went inside. She would stop about 20 feet from the doors, stand there for a minute or two, and then turn around and walk away into the darkness. After this happened a few times, Lisa's curiosity got the better of her. One night, when a woman got out of the cab, Lisa didn't drive away immediately. She watched. The woman walked to her usual spot, stopped, and just stood there, staring at the hospital entrance. After about 2 minutes, she turned and started walking down the street. Lisa made a decision. She slowly drove alongside the woman at a distance, following her. The woman walked for about 3 blocks, then turned into a small park. Lisa parked and watched from the car. The woman sat down on a bench, and that's where she stayed. Just sitting, staring at nothing. Lisa sat there for 20 minutes. The woman didn't move. Finally, Lisa got out and approached her. "Ma'am, are you all right? Do you need a ride home?" The woman turned to look at her, and Lisa's breath caught. The woman's eyes were empty. Not sad, not confused, just completely empty. "Who are you?" the woman asked. I'm your taxi driver. I've driven you to the hospital every Thursday for the past 2 months." The woman's expression didn't change. "I don't take taxis," she said. Lisa felt a chill run through her. "But you do. You call from the same address every week. 342 Birchwood Avenue." The woman shook her head slowly. "I've never lived at that address. I don't even know where that is." Lisa's mind was racing. This didn't make sense. She pulled out her phone and showed the woman the ride history. The same pickup address, the same time, every Thursday. The woman stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, In a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "That's my daughter's address. But my daughter died 3 years ago." Lisa felt like the ground had dropped out from under her. "She used to visit me every Thursday," the woman continued. "She would pick me up and we would come here to this hospital. I had a routine appointment every week. But she died in a car accident 3 years ago. I haven't been back since." Lisa didn't know what to say. "But you've been in my cab. I've driven you multiple times." The woman just shook her head. "I don't remember any of that." Lisa drove the woman home that night to a completely different address than the one she'd been picking her up from. The woman went inside, and Lisa sat in her car, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The next Thursday at 11 p.m., Lisa got a request from 342 Birchwood Avenue. She accepted it out of morbid curiosity. When she arrived at the address, no one came out. She waited for 10 minutes, then canceled the ride. She never got another request from that address again. To this day, Lisa can't explain what happened. Who was she picking up all those nights? Why didn't the woman remember? And most disturbing of all, whose account was requesting those rides? Lisa checked later. The account that had been requesting the rides was registered under the name of the woman's deceased daughter. For the final story, I'm going back to the United States, to a small town in rural Pennsylvania. This was shared by a driver named Robert, and it happened just last year. Robert was driving home after finishing his shift around 2 a.m. The roads were empty, foggy, and he was exhausted. He wasn't technically working. His app was off. His shift was done. But then, out of nowhere, a man stepped out into the middle of the road. Robert slammed on his brakes, stopping just a few feet from hitting him. The man was middle-aged, wearing dirty jeans and a flannel shirt. He didn't look injured, just disoriented. Robert rolled down his window. "Jesus, man, are you okay? I almost hit you." The man walked up to the car slowly, and that's when Robert noticed his eyes. They were bloodshot, and he had this strange, intense stare. "I need a ride," the man said. It wasn't a question. Robert's first instinct was to refuse. He was off duty, and this guy seemed off. But they were in the middle of nowhere, and something about the man's demeanor made Robert feel like saying no wasn't an option. "Where do you need to go?" Robert asked. The man pointed down the road. "That way. I'll tell you when to stop." Against his better judgment, Robert unlocked the doors. The man got in. They drove in silence for about 5 minutes. Robert kept glancing in the mirror. The man was just staring out the window, not blinking, barely breathing. Then, suddenly, the man spoke. "Turn left here." There was no road to the left, just trees. Robert started to say. "Turn left here." The man's voice was cold. Robert's heart was pounding. He could feel the tension in the car. Something was very, very wrong. Then he saw it, barely visible between the trees, was an old dirt path, completely overgrown. "I can't drive down there," Robert said, trying to keep his voice steady. "My car won't make it." The man leaned forward. Robert could feel his breath on the back of his neck. "I said turn." Robert made a split-second decision. He slammed on the accelerator instead and blew past the dirt path. In the rearview mirror, he saw the man's face contort with rage. "Stop the CAR," the man roared. Robert didn't stop. He drove faster. The man was grabbing at the back of Robert's seat now, trying to reach him. Up ahead, Robert saw lights, a gas station, still open. He pulled in and started honking his horn, trying to get attention. The man stopped. In the mirror, Robert saw him sit back slowly. "You made a mistake," the man said quietly. Then he opened the door and got out. But instead of running away, he just stood there next to the car, staring at Robert through the window, smiling. Robert jumped out and ran into the gas station, yelling for the clerk to call the police. When they looked outside 30 seconds later, the man was gone. The police came and took Robert's statement. They searched the area, but found nothing. 2 days later, the police called Robert. They'd investigated that dirt path he'd mentioned, the one the man wanted him to turn down. About a quarter mile down that path, they found an abandoned cabin. Inside the cabin, they found zip ties, duct tape, and several items of women's clothing. They also found something else, a list of license plate numbers. Taxi and rideshare vehicles. 7 different cars, including Robert's. The police believe the man had been flagging down drivers in that area for months, possibly years. They're still investigating, but they think he may be connected to several missing person cases in the region. They told Robert he was lucky he didn't turn down that path. They still haven't found the man. Robert quit driving that week. He said he still has nightmares about the man's smile. That calm, cold smile when Robert wouldn't stop the car. Sometimes late at night, Robert drives past that area where he picked up the passenger. He never sees anyone, but he also never forgets how close he came to becoming another name on that list. Those were 5 disturbing true stories from late-night taxi drivers. People who were just trying to do their jobs and ended up encountering something they'll never forget. If you're a rideshare or taxi driver who's had a strange experience, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. If you made it this far, hit that subscribe button. I share stories like these every week. And if you're ever out late at night, maybe think twice before getting into that cab. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there.